G'day cocktail lovers, time for a special treat. Well, it's a special treat for me anyway. I'm going to do a taste of my newest whiskey. It's from local distillery Starward. They are just making huge inroads around the world in world whiskey competitions. They keep winning awards. In fact, they get to call themselves the most awarded whiskey in Australia, if not the world, for the amount of awards they win. And that's usually for their regular line. This is very much a one-off. It's called Bourbon Cask No. 2 because it's the second time they've released a single malt that was aged in ex-bourbon casks. And as I understand it, this is like an alternate history for them. The vast majority of their whiskies are aged in ex-wine barrels or fortified wine barrels, and that gives them their sort of signature taste. But in the early days, apparently there was a toss-up should they use ex-bourbon barrels or ex-wine barrels, and they have done a previous bourbon cask release. It's quite a few years ago. This is where they might have been if they decided to have ex-bourbon barrels as the main casks they age in. But they've gone with wine by and large. I think this qualifies as what US bourbon hunters would call a unicorn. Not only is it a one-off release, you had to be on their mailing list for a chance to get it. You had to enter a ballot with arguably not everyone who wanted a bottle could get one. I got a ticket in the ballot, and so I got my bottle. And it sold out within a day. And if I understand rightly, they're never making this available in shops. It's like all gone now. So now I'm going to try and get the seal off. It's not quite working for me, and give it a taste. Seal removed. Now it's time for the thing you only get once, that first pop of the stopper. That was satisfying. And also the glug 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 of the first pour. I'm going to do it right on my audio recorder to get some good ASMR. This is their new bottle. It didn't glug 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 that much. Oh well, it's time for a taste though. Some typical whiskey notes on the aroma, but very sweet to me. They say on the nose it's like charred pineapple, and I guess that's not a huge leap, but going in for a taste. I think it might be the power of suggestion. They put this little pamphlet in with the bottle, and they're saying on the palate, dried banana, honey, and lemon curd. Lemon curd's a very unusual note. They've put it in my head. I feel like I can actually taste that in there. This is 52% ABV, 104 proof, so it's got a decent kick. I'm going to do a comparison with a couple of their other whiskies. This is my favourite of their standard range, Nova. It's just a 40% ABV single malt. And this is another of their limited editions. This was an anniversary special called Vitalis. This is also 52% ABV. So once more with the bourbon cask. Even with that comparatively higher proof, it doesn't burn going down. It's got a very light, bright sweetness to it that I really enjoy. Now, how does my standard favourite that's only 40% ABV compare to it? It's less complex, and it definitely doesn't have that lemon curd and fruitiness that the bourbon barrel one has. And just to see if it's all about the proof, this is the 52% limited edition Vitalis. That's a richer, darker flavour than the bourbon cask one. If the bourbon cask one is fruity and a very light honey, this is almost like burnt honey or even molasses, the sweetness in this one. They're all really good and all really different. But speaking of the pamphlet that I mentioned, there are some recommended cocktails in here. One is, it's essentially an old-fashioned, but they say to use a charred pineapple syrup. So I specifically made a charred pineapple syrup to go with this. It's pretty straightforward. You coat some pineapple in sugar, char it however you choose. I actually used a sandwich press, and then make a sugar syrup and add it to the sugar syrup and let it steep so the flavours permeate the sugar syrup. They call this old-fashioned variation the tropical suit, playing up the tropical elements of the bourbon cask whiskey along with the charred pineapple sugar syrup. So here's how we make it. In a mixing glass, put 60 mils or 2 ounces of the whiskey, and then 10 mils or 1/3 of an ounce of the charred pineapple sugar syrup, and finally 2 dashes of aromatic bitters. Add ice to the glass, stir that for 20 to 25 seconds to chill and dilute the drink, then strain that into a rocks glass over preferably a huge chunk of sexy clear ice. For garnish, I'm using a twist of orange peel and a maraschino cherry on a skewer. The recommended garnish was actually this slightly elaborate thing of freezing a disc of yogurt with some lemon zest on it. I did not do that, obviously, because it's pretty much an old-fashioned. I just went with my favourite old-fashioned garnishes, the orange peel and the cherry. But I have been so hanging out to try this, so let's taste it. Wow, that charred pineapple syrup really does go well with this whiskey. It's an old-fashioned. It's whiskey, sugar and bitters. But oof, it's just its own flavours, and they really came up with a good idea to accentuate the flavours in this whiskey with the charred pineapple syrup. Really going to enjoy this. And I do like this particular whiskey maker is pitching itself lately not to traditional whiskey drinkers, although obviously, as I said, it wins awards around the world. So traditional whiskey drinkers really like Starward whiskies, but they're doing a lot of marketing, pitching at young people. They're kind of highlighting how the whiskies are mostly aged in red wine barrels, makes them bright and fruity, and they're going for this whole young vibe, so I'm not the target demo for that sort of advertising. But I do love that even with a very special limited release whiskey, they promote cocktails to go with it, because I'm a cocktail guy. As much as I have quite a few whiskies, and there's actually more in the cupboard, I very rarely just sit around drinking whiskey straight. Usually I only do that to compare the flavours between whiskies when I'm deciding what to use in a cocktail. And then I'm going to go and drink it in a cocktail, like this one. It's a real treat, and sadly, unless you drop by my place, you probably can't get to taste this. But, you know, wherever you are in the world, there's probably some independent or semi-independent distillers. I think one of the big international distillers is a major stakeholder in Starward these days. There'll be local distillers who are probably doing incredibly interesting things, and you should check it out and support them because, well, one for the little guy basically, but also it's how you find really interesting stuff. I certainly don't regret buying heavily into Australian distillers for all my spirits and for cocktail making, and I think you'll like it too if you find someone local. But wherever you are and whatever you're drinking, I hope you're looking after yourself, I hope you're having a good time, and I hope to see you again soon. Until I do see you again, I will say cheers.